Hello, everyone, and welcome to coaching show number 7 with a very technical topic, stride calibration. But it's cool. It's the first time that we're going really hands-on, really practical with something that people can try out at home and hopefully discuss with us as well. I have dragged him back on screen all the way from Colorado, all the way from the sport of endurance. Gear Fisher, you're here with us. How are you?
I'm doing great, Sam. Good to, this is our big number 7. I love that this show touches on sometimes, the business of coaching. Today's show is going to be much more on practical application, technical approach, things that people can try with their own horse. So yeah, we're going to cover a range of topics, but this is mostly going to be the Sam show, talking about stride length, and I'll be chiming in a bit here and there. So I have a lot to learn myself.
Yeah, well, it's cool. And we can play. I saw Kendall's been winning, so your daughter's been out competing and winning. So we'll see if we can get it applying to her as well. But good to be back out, I'm sure.
Yeah, it's been great. She has a big show down in Parker, Colorado, at the Colorado Horse Park. It's the first show of the year, well, since the whole COVID craziness, and things have been going really well. This is the second week of the show. It's going for 4 weeks. Everybody's wearing masks. Everybody's trying to social distance. They've taken all the bleachers out. They've asked people not to basically invite spectators. They're saying just one parent or one person plus groom and trainer along with a rider. They've got hand sanitizer everywhere. So that's what the horse show is. But all in all, it's not that much different than past shows for us. So, and she's been doing really well. So excited to kind of be back in it.
Awesome. Yeah, well, we've been back out as well. And it's partly what has kind of stimulated the topic of conversation for this show. It is all about stride management, so managing the horse's stride, because when we go competing, every course designer in the world is working to this 12-foot canter stride. So 4 yards. We see everyone before a competition takes place stepping out those distances. And most people, there's lots of different metric systems and measurement systems around the world, but a lot of people use yards, which is 3 foot to a yard. So, and then it's 2 yards for landing, and then they're counting 4 yards, and there's one horse's stride, another 4 yards, there's another horse's stride. What I saw when I was out starting competing, is a lot of people struggle on those related distances. So you might get this distance where, and riders are talking about it. They say, is that 4? Is it 5? Is it long? Is it short? But we're all assuming that our horse is just going to have this 4 yard or 12-foot canter stride. And we know that, like humans, horses are different shapes and sizes, and they don't all have a 12-foot canter stride. And you need to know. It is the most important piece of information, really, that you can have going into the ring, is certainly from what you can gauge at home. Obviously, when you go in the ring, you need to know where fence 1 and fence 2 are and where you're going. But the piece of information that you can record in your mind and be aware of and manage is that kind of comfort zone and that canter stride. And I know that a couple of my horses actually kind of struggle with that 12-foot canter. That they're at their kind of top of their range when they get there, and they're having to go quite fast in order to get it. Like they're generating an awful lot of forward speed to get the 12-foot canter. We're working on them all the time with suppleness and different training techniques, and that's going to be too technical for this show. But that's a lot of what coaching is about, is actually how to change that canter stride. But it's being aware of it, because otherwise we just go in the ring, we think we're going to get down that distance, and we find ourselves either we didn't quite get there on the distance, so a horse chipped in the extra stride, which can leave you vulnerable to knocking that front pole, or you're rushing, you're kind of getting there towards the end and you're like, oh, I'm going to have to go, I'm going to have to kick. to get that distance. And then that flattens the jump and you end up getting a much lower jump. So, and then the other thing that I know you're going to like here is that I worked out the coolest way to do this using OnForm. So I've always worked on canter poles. I've always worked on a 6-stride distance. People will have seen me at internationals, particularly on the final day after cross country. I will do what I call calibrating the horse's stride, because I want to see, did they, sometimes when it's not taking too much out of them, the horse actually is really loose the next day. Their stride's really big because they've been galloping the day before. And that galloping has actually really kind of stretched them and given them quite a long stride. On other kind of different ground conditions, depending on the length of the course, depending on how much it took out, the horse could actually, their stride could have shortened up. They could have tightened up quite a lot, particularly because they've had a kind of a night's sleep and stuff like that. So I've always wanted to know it.
So what happens when your horse, and I've been living this because I go out and walk the course, and we count 2 steps. So, 6 feet, 2 yards for the landing, 2 for the takeoff, and then 4 for a stride, right? Is that
correct?
Same across the world?
Yeah, it's not like driving, where we do it on different sides of the road. At least we count the same.
So, and I've often actually wondered, I mean, I see little ponies go in doing these courses, and then there's big 18-hand, warm bloods doing it. When you realize that your horse is maybe more comfortable with an 11-foot stride versus the standard 12, what do you do there?
Okay. So if we have the exercise backstage, we'll pull up the setup as to how we're going to gauge where our horse's comfort zone is. So what you can see on screen, I'm sorry, podcast listeners, but you need to check out Echo Ratings, check out Coaching Show number 7, and you'll see it. But it's actually very simple. I can describe it to you. There are 4 distances that I run parallel using canter poles. If you're good on the canter poles and you want some more accountability, then I like the raised canter pole. So I put it in the very bottom hole of the stand. So it's just raised off the ground. So then if you do get a bit close on the distance, or if you're a little bit off and the horse touches the pole, it's going to fall, and you have that accountability for yourself. So you can start, kind of counting your clear rate as well. And you should be getting to a point where you're 100 clear out of 100 attempts. That's where you want to get to. But we set up these canter pole distances, and I do 4 parallel, and I work on 28 yards, which is your standard competition 6-stride distance. So that's your 2 for takeoff. 4 times 6 is 24. So that brings you to 26 plus your 2 for takeoff. So that's 28. So your first distance is that absolute standard 6 strides, as it should be in competition. But then I build another distance beside it, which is 27, another one beside that, which is 26, and another one beside that, which is 25. So I'm only altering it by 1 yard each time. But that allows me to really kind of play with small differences. And you'll see why that's important here, because that comes back to your question as to how do you move that canter stride. If a horse wants to have a 13-foot canter, which is too big, or if they only want to have a 10 or 11-foot canter, which is too small, how are we going to get them to 12-foot? And the critical point is not to try and force the issue and make a big deal of it. The thing is to try and eke that out, literally kind of inch at a time. What I will do when I start off on my 4 distances here is, because I'm warming up, and again, this will be surprising to some people who ride horses all the time will be fully aware of it, but I would go down the 25-yard distance on 7 strides. So that is, that's only just over a 10-foot canter, let alone 12-foot. And that feels really normal and comfortable for that kind of easy warm-up canter. It's not a good enough quality canter on most of my horses to jump a 130, 140 oxer, but it's a nice just warm-up canter. That's where they're at. And then I will stay on 7 strides, and I'll work up onto the next 3 distances. So I'll go from the 25 yards up to the 26, up to the 27, and up to the 28. And then I'll go up a gear to 6 strides, back onto the 25-yard distance. So that canter stride is growing now. It's now over 11 foot. and again, work through until I'm at that 28 yard. I'm now at that 12-foot canter. And that's a really nice way to warm up your horse. I'll do the 7 strides. I'll do those 4 reps on the right rein. Then I'll do the 4 reps on the left rein. And by the way, that again is really valuable information, because your horse doesn't necessarily have the same length of stride when they're coming off the left as when they're coming off the right.
This is, I just have to mention, this is like, it's almost like, how could people not be doing this and just assuming that their horse is a perfect 12-foot strider, and versus, you know, going into a structured sort of approach like this where they can really evidence where the horse is comfortable, so you know what truly 6 strides, 7, 5 do for you.
Yeah, and it's, you know, I think we all have, you know, a feeling, and you know, we know that, you know, this guy's a little bit short striding, so I might, you know, if it's a 6 stride distance, I might actually add 1 and do 7 in the ring because he's kind of little and all the rest. But if you want to really manage that stride, and there is nothing more dangerous than when you get caught in between. So when you know your horse is short striding, adding a stride is going to come quite easy to you. But it's when your horse is literally just a couple of inches off that 12-foot canter, those couple of inches multiplied over 6 strides suddenly puts you in that really uncomfortable spot where instead of being 2 yards off the fence, you're now 2.5 or 3 yards off the fence. And that's where those kind of, you know, those moments that no one wants to have, that's where they happen. So, I mean, but aside from the information, the process of how to get there, of how to take myself from, okay, I now know that my horse is not naturally in the competition stride zone. Now I have a process, and this is the key for everyone. We can probably take the exercise off screen now at this point, but this is the key for everyone, is that you don't go from where you are straight away to where you need to be without the kind of taking the incremental steps along the way. And that's what's really nice about having those 4 distances there to work with, and knowing that you can change the number of strides, and knowing that going from 7 strides to 6 strides, that's going to change your stride length as well. But being quite measured about it, it sounds like you're being over technical, but you're not. You're giving a really nice incremental process to improve. And once you know, we'll talk about this in all sports gear, where we talk about the comfort zone and just getting kind of to the edge of the comfort zone, and that's the really productive place to be. You don't want to go from in the comfort zone to way outside the comfort zone. And so again, this allows you to do that. It allows you to, and that's actually why you want to do these reps, preferably with someone there with the video, so that if you're a little bit unsure of where the comfort zone is, you've got someone giving you that feedback to help you. And then they can start to prescribe the work, saying, look, stay on the 7 strides for now, particularly on these 2 distances, maybe the 28 yard and the 27 yard distance, and really practice and refine those. But that's where you want to work with for now. Then next week, we'll look at going to 6 strides, maybe on the 25 and the 26 yard distance. And so you've got someone to help you along the way, help you prescribe the right level of work as well.
Mm-hmm. So you mentioned using this weekly. Is that how often you would tend to do this? Is this, you know, do you calibrate your horse, if you will? How often? Once a month, etc.?
Okay, so I do this every single week because there are other benefits here as well, other than just I'm going to know fairly quickly the information about where my horse naturally is. And that's not going to change a whole pile. But obviously for some horses, my training objective is that I do change them slightly, that I am bringing, if a horse has naturally got a 10-foot canter and they're out of their comfort zone by the time they get to like 11.5 foot and they've got to compete at 12, well then like my goals over the next few weeks and months and years are going to be that the horse becomes, you know, finds that 12-foot canter much easier. So I'm doing it on a weekly basis. The actual repetition for the horse is really beneficial because you're playing with different canters and different stride lengths. And that in itself is bringing so much elasticity to the horse. If we just canter around in the exact same stride all the time, we're not really developing the spectrum of muscles, and getting those kind of ligaments and things like that kind of extending, collecting, sitting. So, when you do collection, you're building up power. When you go for the extension, you're kind of building up that reach and that suppleness as well. So again, it's why it's nice weekly thing to do, because it's good for the horse. But the biggest thing, and why I started in this whole kind of area with these canter pulls, is that every time you ride a distance like that, you're improving your eye, you're improving your accuracy as a rider. And that is probably the single biggest thing that I can bring to my chance of jumping a clear round when I go in the ring. We see loads of different riders with loads of different techniques. Some have different leg positions, different hand positions, different upper body, different lower leg. And okay, there's generally an accepted, nice, standard place to be. There's definitely the stylish position, but it's a bit like golfers, that not everyone has the same swing and the same technique. And what really matters in golf is that you get the ball in or close to the hole. What really matters with show jumping is that you can deliver your horse with a good canter to a good takeoff point. And that allows the horse to jump clear. And it is that simple. And we sometimes lose track a little bit of that simplicity. And this type of training just focuses on that. We're focusing on the canter of the horse and the accuracy for me as a rider. And if you get those two things nailed, mix it in with a bit of grid work here and there, and you're going to jump a lot of clear rounds.
Does this help with, I'll see sometimes the rider realizes halfway through a couple of fences that they're going to be short or long, and they have to change, their velocity or whatever. Is this something that's going to help with that, which I think is almost like an indecisive, oh no, I'm too close, so they pull back. Is that something that will be improved through this?
Yeah, because that's down to identifying your distance and trying to identify that kind of far. It's like when you're driving a car, it's like knowing when you're going to be in trouble. But there's two things. One, you've got to identify the situation, which this is doing. That's really what I'm talking about with developing the eye. But then secondly, you got to be able to do something about it. So if you're saying, okay, I'm going to end up a little bit close, I need to adjust and the horse needs to listen to me. Well, even what I described going through that exercise where you're going through 4 different distances with different numbers of strides. So you're changing your ability to change your horse's stride length is basically the ability to drive in different gears at different speeds. That is your toolbox. So being able to identify that distance and then be able to do something about it is critical. And then the whole thing becomes smooth. And that again is why, rather than when people see the setup of that exercise, you could do it with a 28-yard distance and just a 26-yard distance. You could just play with 2 strides. If you've got the true distance and you've got a kind of a half stride distance. I love the 1-yard increments over that distance because it really teaches you to hone in on the subtleties. Particularly as you go up the levels, you really want that precision in that stride management.
I'm curious, as a international rider, Sam, how soon before a fence do you know that you're going to get a good spot or a bad spot? Like, is this something you can see from a long way away?
That is like every single sports person. We are not robots. So it varies. There are days when you're just picking strides out and I could have one hand on the reins and be drinking a cup of coffee with the other and know 8 strides out that I'm absolutely fine and it's coming up. Those are the dream days. There's other days and you're coming down and to be honest, it's more doubt. It gets better and better with age. I used to have a terrible eye and that was because you mentioned the word indecision, and that is really the biggest problem when it comes to seeing that distance, is because you start to doubt yourself. The minute you doubt yourself, you change pace, When you change pace, your stride pattern changes. So now, even if you have seen the distance, you've just changed your speed. So the distance is changing. And that is the absolute killer. So again, this just has the confidence to go, right, I'm going to ride in a good rhythm, and I'm going to trust that I'm going to pick up that distance. And usually on a kind of a good normal day, you're pretty happy kind of 5 strides out that things are going well, or that you're making kind of subtle adjustments to, in those last strides, that's going to help you be okay. But that takes time. People who think that you either can or can't do that, just look at me in 2014 and 2010, and you'll look at someone who you would just think, get that guy out of the show jumping arena, does not belong in there. And then it was actually this type of work that changed it around. This is purposeful practice. When you're riding a distance, knowing the number of strides you're supposed to do, knowing the distance that is there, knowing exactly why you're doing it. Now you're really, really focused on what you're doing. And if you make a mistake, and you will make mistakes, of course you'll make mistakes and you'll get distances wrong, you've got very kind of, again, clear feedback just from the exercise. So it is once you get into this type of training, it's a great one to do by yourself as well, that you can practice by yourself. But we'll get into the stopwatch. We can't leave this show without talking about the stopwatch timer in OnForm to take it to a new level. But you get the coach feedback to help you if you're struggling, saying, look, I'm still struggling on this 12-foot distance. Can you tell me why? That's you got your coach on blocking you. But the other one is the timer. Will I go for it?
Let's hear it. You mentioned at the top of the show that you had a way to use video and the timer in this exercise. So let's dive into that.
Exactly. So anyone who hasn't yet played with the stopwatch timer in OnForm, please get in touch with us. If you've like, the first thing you need to do if you haven't got it is download OnForm. Your great first video, and I'm sure you've got loads of videos on your phone that you could send off to your coach anyway. But if you don't, the first one you want to do is give this exercise a go, and then you can send it to someone. I will take these from anywhere in the world. You can kind of calibrate someone's stride. You don't have to be there with them. I could do this with people that I teach in clinics in Canada, for example. And then in the feedback tools in OnForm, there is a stopwatch button. And all you have to do is you select that timer, press the screen, and the stopwatch starts going. With our kind of super slow-mo and our ability to zoom and play things at kind of half speed, quarter speed, it is so simple to get the moment that horse is landing over that first pole. So that is them coming in. They're now in on the distance. I always do it with the leading front leg. So if they're on the left rein, it will be the left front leg. As that hits the ground, I set my timer. And when that last front leg, you can do it for every stride if you want to get really technical, but I do it coming in, and I do it when they've just taken their last stride. So they're what will normally be their 6th stride on this distance. And you can time it. And you know what the distance is because we've set up all the distances. And you now know how long it takes. So you've got how many strides they've taken per second. That is their stride cadence. And stride cadence or stride frequency, depending on where you are in the world, that is huge in a sport like running. That is a hugely important piece of information. And what I have learned is that it differs hugely from one horse to another. I will do 6 strides over that distance, typically in about 3.6 seconds, but I have one horse who does it in 3.1 seconds. So it's a huge, like half a second over 3 seconds is a big difference. And that is basically how you end up winning jump offs and winning lots of money. But it is so cool to start getting that level of information in this sport. We know we're a little bit behind some of the other sports in terms of how much sort of science we apply, but being able to do that just using your camera phone is so cool. So there we go. I mean, I think we've got an exercise that we can try. I think we've covered the why it's important pretty well. And taking it to the next level with the OnForm app is also like a massive part of it.
I would love to see people try this in their own ring and then post it to social media with the hashtag #GetOnForm. And then, Sam, I'm going to commit you to checking out what people are doing and making some comments.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I think just having that feedback is, and on such an important area, this is the fundamental contributor to your chance of jumping clear rounds. If you can nail those if those distances are your comfort zone rather than what's going to undo you in a round, it makes all the difference. And as you go through these exercises, as you go through this training, you're going to improve your horse's canter. You're going to be able to increase the power, increase your control, and importantly, you're going to increase your accuracy as well. So it's ticking a lot of boxes. Awesome.
My dogs are going insane, so it's time to maybe wrap it up.
I know. I was so nervous at kind of 5 p.m. on a Friday. We're baling hay at home. I was so nervous it'd be my kids that would come in and make all the noise. So I'm so happy that it's your dogs. That is definitely a win for me. But Gear, thanks for coming on the show again. Great to have you. And let's hope that we get some traction and engagement from this one.
Yeah, definitely. I'd love to see people trying it out. And I better go deal with my dog. There's one now. So, oh yes, Sam, I think there's one more thing about a giveaway.
Oh yeah. I will. We go onto the onto my website and take 25% off. Just quote coaching show number 7. You want to get in touch with me today. So sam@equiratings.com. So if you want me to review your version of this stride calibration exercise, get my feedback on it. I'll do the timer tool for you as well, so you can see how to use that. So just basically, you'll avail that 25% off as long as you get in touch with me before midnight tonight. So you've got over 6 hours, and you can get that. So do sam@equiratings.com is the best way to get in touch. samwatson.ie if you want to get in touch with me via the website as well. But that is it.
Good deal.
No problem.
All right. Sounds good. Thanks so much, Sam. It's really cool to see. I think it'll be great work. I know we'll give it a try here too.
Awesome. Talk to you soon. Thanks, Gary. Thank you everyone for joining, and we will talk to you soon.